Hey everybody, it's Bob from TNT. We're here on TNT Tuesday. First off, I want to apologize for missing the last two Tuesdays. We're going to go over that here in a minute. So today we'll talk a little bit about the last 4Xploring trip we did with Ladies Off-Road Network. And then we'll go wander around the shop a little and show you a couple of projects we're working on and some new parts we're also working on. So without any further ado, 2 weeks ago, yesterday, we started in Flagstaff, 2 weeks ago, Sunday, we started at Off-Road Expo in Flagstaff, Arizona. To kind of give you a little perspective, we put our map, and I always got my map up, we kind of stuck some pins in there. So we started up here in Cheyenne, and Mary and I drove the Megalander down to Denver, over to Moab, to Bluff, and this pin here represents the first night Mary and I spent on our way to Off-Road Expo. Went down and checked out some stuff along Comb Ridge, a place called the River House Ruins. So we camped there the first night and kind of got in the swing of things, because we have a week of camping ahead of us. So after that, we went over to our favorite breakfast place in Mexican Hat, had breakfast over there, and then we drove back north and went through the Valley of the Gods. Similar to Monument Valley, not as big of monuments as what's in Monument Valley. Last time Mary and I went down that way, we went through Monument Valley and we had to skip that, so we went and saw that. Pretty cool, if you ever get a chance to go down there. From there we made our way down through the reservation. I don't have my glasses on, so let me check before I lie to you. Kayenta, Tuba City, Cameron, and ended up in Flagstaff Friday afternoon. That Friday evening at the expo grounds, we had a Scottle cook-off with Jerry and his wife from Tembo Tusk. A little disappointed that more of you didn't show up. It was Jerry versus Bob, but that's all right. Next year we'll get that information out a little sooner and see if we can get a few more people. We had a good time. The weather was not nice. It was cold and windy, but being from Wyoming, that's not a big deal to me. So Jerry made his peri-peri shrimp, and I made a garlic butter steak and potatoes, all on the Scottle. Really wasn't an official winner declared. We just kind of sampled it out into the crowd, whoever was still left, and everybody enjoyed the food. Saturday we spent the day wandering around Expo, shook some hands, did that sort of thing. And Sunday we met all of the ladies from Ladies Off-Road Network that Charlene reached out. Let's do a little backstory on that. Charlene reached out to Mary and I'm guessing about a year ago, and asked us what we thought of putting together an adventure for the Ladies Off-Road Network and leading it and hosting it and doing all the stuff that goes into preparing a trip like that, and we said absolutely. So over the last year we've been planning this. So we took the ladies from Flagstaff on Sunday afternoon and headed up towards the North Rim, hence the name of the trip. It was North Rim Adventure, and it was an adventure. Kind of record-setting, unheard of weather for that time of the year. So it was an adventure in all scope of the discussion. Our first night we camped out here near Vermilion Cliffs. There's a little campgrounds on the Utah-Arizona border called conveniently enough, state line campgrounds. We wheeled into there late in the afternoon, early evening. Pretty much had the place to ourselves because of the weather, thankfully. Pitch camped there, made dinner for them that night. Kind of got everybody grouped around the fire and started getting to know each other better. We had been chatting all day on the radio, but there's nothing like sitting around a campfire. So we got to know everyone. Everyone was having a good time, even though the weather was not cooperating. We saw rain, sleet, snow, hail, all that night. Some light wind. I understand I'm from Wyoming. Light wind to me is 25 miles an hour. So we saw some light wind. Spent the night. Next morning we got up. We're headed for the north rim of the Grand Canyon. So we left Vermilion, come up here to the top to Jacobs Lake, and about 3 miles from the top, the turnoff is at one of the highest elevations. So as we're climbing up to that, it started to snow. And it snowed, and it snowed some more, and when we got to Jacobs Lake, there was about 8 inches on the ground. No big deal, adapt and overcome. We all got gassed and met over on the side of the parking lot, get regrouped, and I noticed I was missing one of my ladies, and she was standing there looking at the sky. She had never seen snow in person. It was quite a special moment, which followed her doing this by boom, 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 boom. All the rest of the girls were throwing snowballs at her. It was pretty cool. So from there we went down to the park itself, down to the North Rim. With the weather, everything in the park was closed other than the main road in and out. So we got to go in the lodge, walk out to the point that's right down below the lodge, and the name of that escapes me at the moment. It was semi-anticlimactic because you could see about that far in front of your face. It was snowing and fog and not really the view I wanted to give them, but you can't count on Mother Nature. So we spent a while there. From there we went back up and we went way back out here in the park, actually outside of the park in the Kaibab National Forest. And took them to Indian Hollow campgrounds for the night. Again, no surprise, had the place to ourselves. We made dinner again that night. Everybody hung around the campfire. The weather was nice, as the name implies. We were down in a hollow, so not a ton of wind. We did have some rain and sleet throughout the evening. Good time had by all. Next morning we got up, so we're Tuesday, this is Wednesday morning, and I took them up to the rim off of the Kaibab. Crazy Jug Point, Timp Point, North Timp Point, and Locust Point, I do believe. I have to check my notes, but whatever. We got to see 4 different points. Weather cooperated, and the girls got to see the vast expanse that is North Rim Grand Canyon. It is extremely impressive. If you've never been, I'd love to take you. If not, get some maps figured out. It's pretty easy to navigate out there. It is extremely remote, so go prepared. So after that, we made our way to Kanab, spent the night in Kanab. Got up the next morning, met a good friend of mine, John. Some of you know John. He's part of the Crawl Zone team. Him and Nathan run Crawl Zone. John's usually the guy holding the camera while Nathan's up front. John's lifelong resident of Kanab, so he knows all the little ins and outs and backs and things tourists don't get to see. So he took us out. We did Peekaboo Slot Canyon. The girls were just in awe of a slot canyon. It was a pretty good day. From there we made our way out back into town, Weather again was not cooperating. It was raining, so the local roads were pretty muddy. So we spent the afternoon at a museum in town, got some history on N Ave itself. I actually had never been there. It was fairly informative. I enjoyed that. That night we again stayed in N Ave. Next morning we took off and I took them out to, with John's help, to some dinosaur tracks. They're fairly unique dinosaur tracks. Typically when you see dinosaur tracks, they are a depression. You know, they put a foot in the mud and squirt, you know, you do it whenever you hike, you can see your footprint. These tracks are unique in that it was like the dinosaurs' feet were muddy and they left a print. So the prints are raised. It's kind of a unique, something different. Girls really enjoyed that. From there we went over and did to the Coral Pink Sand Dunes, which is a Utah State Park. This group really wasn't equipped to run on the big sand dunes, so I took them out behind the sand dunes and we found a nice loop that gives you some nice overlooks over the sand, and you can see the whole coral pinks. If you could see them, it was snowing again. There's a resounding theme to this trip. We had lots of snow. Girls were troopers. We pressed on, we finished the loop, we came to a small creek crossing that is normally dry, had water running in it, so we had a wet water crossing. That was a good time. Found our way out of there, made our way over to Zion National Park. So in Zion, went through the park, saw some things, come out the other side to Springdale and met up with Larry McCrae from Zion Jeep Tours, who I had coordinated with and handed over the reins, and he led us around the backcountry around Zion to get some, you know, when you're in Zion, everything is here. He took us to some places where you can see the entire park. It was pretty impressive. That night we met at Woody's from I Hate Mud, and I kind of turned the group loose, and Mary and I then proceeded Saturday morning to start working our way home. So there's your not real short version of the trip, but that was the trip in a nutshell. There is a Facebook group on this trip. It's on off of the 4Xploring Facebook page. It's North Rim Adventure 2019 group, something to that effect. You'll find it if you look for it. Bunch of pictures in there. As I'm getting caught back up from being gone, we'll start posting some more pictures from that. So that's kind of how a 4Xploring trip kind of sums up or works out. So let's, my camera gal's going, so we'll take a walk out the shop and we'll see a couple of Jeeps and go from there. So I'm going to give you a couple of brief overviews of this project. You know, I know you've seen it in the back when we were back there. We finally got enough of it together that we can bring it out here and start final fitting and assembly. This particular unit is getting a Gen 1 LS motor, so an LS1, all aluminum 5.7. We're using a Novak adapters kit. So we have motor placement, radiators in place. We started the coilover conversion. Our towers are in at the moment, not final position, but we need to get them in so we can start working on the back. The magic in this Jeep, this front is pretty routine for us. It's our long arm kit, coilover kit. This particular Jeep has J8 axles, so the heavy 44 with the big brakes on the front, and it's getting the J8 Dana 60 in the rear. but we're doing something a little different in the rear. Customer has requested a little more wheelbase to give a better ride. So we've done this in the past, but this is now a production part. This is our TJ6 corner. So think about that. You had CJ5s and CJ6s back in the day. The CJ6 was just a stretched version of a CJ5, right? Same door opening, same everything. They just put a bunch of material here in the middle to get that 101-inch wheelbase that was on the CJ6. Similar concept. We're not the first to do it, but I'd like to think we will be the first to have a complete kit. Sliders have been stretched, corners have been stretched. So essentially you're taking your LJ and giving it TJ departure. So the 5 inches that is typically here in an LJ is now here. So that's a 5-inch stretch. We have a kit to move the gas tank back, kit to deal with the cross member that the gas tank used to attach to, all the suspension pieces as we finish those. So this will be a complete kit when it's all said and done. Really gives your LJ a very unique look. Will work very well in the adventure overlanding space. In my opinion, a touch long for a hardcore rock crawler, unless you're on, say, 42s. And if you are on that big a tire, we do have a corner to accommodate that big of a tire. This one is set up for 37s. It's going to be a real short build. This one here is just in for maintenance, local customer, fairly big fella. So we are cutting the seat brackets apart to slide his seat back as far as we can get. It's about 2 inches to give him a little more leg room and just room in general. He's a pretty big fella. So we can do pretty much anything you want, from full-on custom one-off build to maintenance to, you know, you dream it up, we can probably handle it. The last thing we want to talk about, we alluded to this on the Instagram, mine and Chuck's, the TNT Instagram, talking about TNT Tuesday. We have Chuck and Mason's TJ in the shop. Brought it in over the weekend. Chuck and I stripped it, started installing new parts, and then I did a little more work on it on Sunday. We're not there yet. We're not even close to being there yet. But the thing I wanted to show you on this is this slider and corner package. This is customizable to you, the consumer, by feeding me, the designer, some measurements. This was an existing armor package off of my TJ, which you haven't seen in a while, but that's our back half kit with an 8-inch stretch, all the corresponding armor. I can make this armor pretty much any way you want it, within reason. I guess the way I should explain that to you, if I think an 8-inch stretch is what needs to be done. Chuck had a little more on his Jeep, and there is no armor that would complement his 12-inch stretch. So we did some measuring, wheelbase, a few things, points off the body, and I was able to move this opening farther back and stretch the slider accordingly. Previous to this, for those of you that know Chuck's Jeep, you already know where I'm headed. For those that you don't, he had standard issue armor, off-the-shelf stuff from a competitor that was designed for a stock TJ, right? So your wheel opening was here, and the slider stopped here. So we had this huge void in this area that was not protected. And as Chuck's getting he's been wheeling it, but he's been St. George, Moab type wheeling, slick rock. There isn't a lot of large, loose boulders. In that environment, there are a few, if you know where to look, but for the most part, it's all slick rock. It's not a big deal. This summer, we're going to transition over to canyon wheeling and big loose rock up in South Dakota. And that void from a traditional comp cut, where you take that standard off the shelf corner and just whack it off, leaves you this huge void. You will be hosed in the big rocks, guaranteed. You'll slide along the rock, the slider tube ends here, and you'll fall off of that rock and it'll shove right in here and you're done. You're pinned, you can't move. So what we do with this Guardian Series armor is lock the corner and slider together through this flange system, so I'm able to stretch that slider back and bring the slider tube right back here to the end of the slider where it should be, so you can slide along and drive the tire into that rock and come up, get up on it, proceed. So that was the number one design goal with bringing Chuck's in, was to redo this armor and fit his stretch. It's not going to be a piece that we would have stocked. It would have to be made to order, so you're probably 3-4 weeks. We'll converse back and forth, email, phone, however that works. So I make sure I understand what you're talking about. You feed me the dimensions that are needed. Plug all that into CAD, move some stuff around, mix and match a few things, and we can build you a semi-custom armor package for your needs. So that's really what I wanted to talk to you about on this particular Jeep. There's a whole bunch more stuff that's going to happen, pretty small detail-oriented stuff. It's a good Jeep that works well the way it is, so we're just going to kind of clean up and finish a few things. Get him ready for the summer and fall season. Summer and fall season. Rock on Woods is in July. We still have openings. Campgrounds are filling. Some are already full, but if you really want to go, we can find you a space or help you find a space. The next big, obviously the big rock trip that we have planned is Last Man Standing. Chuck's little video a week and a half or 2 weeks ago kind of set the stage for that. There are some openings. Please send me an email at info@4Xploring.com. We'll get you some information back on where we're going, what we're doing, how to get there, all of those things. We're working on a couple of fun things to do. We'll leave it at that. Chuck and Mason are working on that for us. So if you still want to go, get your application in, or get me your email and I'll get you an application to send back. Both of those trips will fill up. They're both a good time. Kind of something out of your norm. So I think that Chuck Mason's giving me that again. So I think we'll wrap it up for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Apologize for missing the last 2 weeks, but we actually tried to go live from the North Rim and could not get enough signal. And last week, being the first day week back after an 11-day trip, was kind of a blur, as you can imagine. So we're back on track. We'll be back next Tuesday. Tune in at noon. Please put in the comments anything you'd like to see, anything you'd like me to discuss. I think next week we'll go a little heavier on tech. So with that being said, shoot some comments in there, what you want to see. Maybe we can work that out, get a Jeep on the lift and do something like that. Thanks for tuning in. Bob from TNT, appreciate you watching. Give us a like, share, and definitely your comments. And we'll see you next week.